ये भी ये समाज के लोग गांव के बीच से नहीं निकाल सकते। ऐसे भी अमुक गांव हमने देखे हैं रूरल में। और साथ साथ में जो पटाखे वगैरह करना हो तो वो लोग नहीं करते। दूसरा हमने एक्सपीरियंस वो भी देखा कि जब हम इंटरव्यू के लिए जाते थे तो वहाँ पे वैसा हम गांव में ही हमारा जो खाने का लंच का जो अरेंजमेंट होता था वो कर देते थे। तो एक गांव का मैं आपसे बात शेयर करना चाह रही हूँ कि वहाँ पे वो गांव के सरपंच ने हमारे लिए पूरा अरेंजमेंट किया था। तो जिस लेडी ने उनके घर किया था पूरा खाना पकाने का वही, तो हम जैसे उनके घर गए तो पहले ही हमको हमारी पूरी टीम को ऐसा प्रश्न पूछा गया कि आप लोग कौन से कास्ट से हो, अलग अलग कास्ट से हो, कौन सी जाति के हो। फिर बाद में उन्होंने क्या किया कि सब जो हमारा लंच था वो घर के बाहर आंगन में रख दिया, पानी का भी सुविधा वहाँ पे छोड़ दी और फिर हमको कहा कि आप लंच कर सकते हैं। तो वो तो हमको बहुत वो लगा था एकदम से। तीसरा मैं बात करूं कि एक गांव था रूरल में, तो वो गांव में ज्यादातर हमने वायलेंस देखा था, बहुत सारा। एक मैं शेयर करूं आपसे, तो जिस पर्सन का हम इंटरव्यू ले रहे थे तो उस पर्सन ने इमीडिएटली हमसे पूछा कि आप लोग क्यों हमसे ये इंफॉर्मेशन लेके फिर हमारी हेल्प करना चाहते हैं। मैं तो वैसे भी जेल से आया हूँ, तो हमको तो एकदम से शॉक लगा। पूछा क्यों, आप क्यों जेल गए थे, ऐसा क्या काम कर दिया कि आपको जेल जाना पड़ा। तो फिर वो बोले कि मैंने मेरी 2 बच्चियां जो है उनको मार डाला है। इससे भी मुझे सेटिस्फेक्शन नहीं हुआ। वो दोनों बच्चियां कितनी छोटी, एक तो 7 बरस की थी और दूसरी तो एकदम छोटी 2 बरस की। इससे भी उनसे सेटिस्फेक्शन नहीं हुआ तो फिर जाके उसकी वाइफ को भी मार डाला। फिर कहते हैं कि इसकी सजा के स्वरूप मैं अभी जेल से बाहर आया हूँ और पैरोल पे छूटा हूँ। फिर जाके एक ओल्ड मैन ने भी बताया कि नहीं ये बात सही है और ये भी सही है कि इस गांव में एवरी ईयर कुछ न कुछ ऐसे क्राइम होते ही रहते हैं, लेकिन ये बातें बाहर नहीं जाती, किसी को कहा भी नहीं जा सकता और जो भी होता है वो गांव में ही सीक्रेट रहता है, ना कोई पुलिस कंप्लेंट की ना कुछ भी आवाज। तो हम तो एकदम शॉक लगा और दंग रह गए कि ये सब क्या। लेकिन ये गांव में वो तो पक्का है, इतना वायलेंस है ही। और ये सब इंफॉर्मेशन जो फील्ड से आती थी तो हमारा तो इस स्टडी से तो एकदम से अलग सा एक्सपीरियंस रहा है। ये स्टडी में हमने, आपको शायद पता होगा या जानोगे ये बुक से, कि हमने रूरल और अर्बन दोनों में किया था, लेकिन बहुत डिफरेंट हमको ये ऐसे एक्सपीरियंस मिले। दूसरे भी काफी सारे हैं, तो आप उस बुक से भी देख सकते हैं। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
थैंक यू चिका मैम। What I'll present briefly in an overview today is what the study found, the Gujarat Social Income Survey found, and specifically what we found in terms of how SEWA makes a difference. Just a brief overview first on the study methodology. This was a study of a sample of 1,500 households in Gujarat, 50% rural, 50% urban, and also men and women half-half. And it was stratified by activity status, meaning salaried, casual labor, self-employed agriculture, and self-employed non-agricultural, based on the NSO from the 61st round. And of that sample, 20% of households were SEWA members, purposefully selected so we could measure the impact of SEWA. In the context of Gujarat's rapid growth, the first thing, I'll first give you a picture of what we found in terms of life for all workers in Gujarat, and then go into the SEWA part. As Ranadaben had mentioned, there's been rapid and tremendous growth in Gujarat. However, what our study found was that life for workers remains rather grim. Money income levels are about rupees 127 rupees per day, and much lower for casual and home-based workers, 57 rupees a day, which is obviously quite low compared to the statutory minimum wage. Women's incomes also are about 40% that of men. In the Gujarat growth story, to put it simply, we'd say there are winners and there are losers. The winners are the salaried employees who find that they're fully employed, employment over 300 days a year, whereas the vast majority of the piece rate home-based and casual labor are pretty much underemployed or grossly underemployed, less than 180 days. In addition to low money income levels, what we call the social determinants of well-being, living conditions, food security, are also, we had some grim findings. 2 out of 5 households reported that their income was not sufficient for them to buy enough food for their home. And amongst poorer households, this was much lower at 3 out of 5. Infrastructure, though, the Gujarat story often tells you the infrastructure story of road and electricity, which is true. At the same time, housing and sanitation have really lagged far behind, which our data again shows. We found interesting in Ahmedabad city, 20% of households still don't have a toilet. It wasn't a surprising finding in the rural areas of 80%. And also in rural Gujarat, this was Surendranagar district, about 1/3 of households are still, only 1/3 of households are pakka fully. In this context, it's not surprising then to see that close to 80% of households had a financial crisis in the past year, and this was a reported financial crisis. And the leading cause of financial crisis has been by far hospitalization or illness, really. And if you see the chart here, 34% of all crises are related to hospital expenses. And if you add in birth expenses, child mortality, and also the debt repayment, illness probably comprises about 50% of all crises. So in this context of insecurity, despite growth, we looked at the data to see how SEWA actually makes a difference. And as you can see, we believe it does. Just a brief overview on SEWA. I think everyone here is familiar. We're a trade union of 1.2 million women across India, of which 6 lakh members are in Gujarat. SEWA members belong to 4 categories of workers: street vendors, home-based workers, women who sell their labor and services, and small producers. The first question that we'd ask is, are SEWA members different socioeconomically, demographically? Because before one looks at the impact, the first question was, are members just anyway functionally different? What we found from an income perspective, absolutely not. SEWA members' incomes match those of the general population or of the sample in the same occupation groups. However, there are 2 things that came up that do make SEWA members different in the fact that they're more disadvantaged. One is that they rely more on income that they earn from their own work as opposed to from assets. And secondly, they're much more likely to be from lower caste and minority groups in the membership. So in that context, SEWA members are actually probably more disadvantaged. When women join SEWA, they primarily join first as a union based on their occupation, and as Namrata said, often participate in a range of activities from training, financial services, health, education, literacy. What we found from the study is that it's the financial activities that draw women the most, particularly savings, loan, and insurance, closely followed by training, which we had a picture of already. Given that, we were pleased to see that SEWA members do seem to be more financially included. If you could go to the next, please. So SEWA members are exceptional in their savings rates in the sense that SEWA members save more than their counterparts in the general population, and much more importantly, save more in financial institutions, informal financial institutions, compared to their counterparts who save at home. SEWA members also borrow more, have more access to credit from a wider network, and interestingly, at lower interest rates. And this chart illustrates that quite clearly. You'll see on the left is savings, the blue is SEWA, and the red is non-SEWA, and then financial institutions, so essentially saving in a bank. Women in SEWA are much more likely to save in a formal institution. And that's probably due to a couple of factors. One is the easy access to SEWA Bank and the door-to-door outreach of SEWA services, but also women's own financial understanding, financial literacy, of SEWA's emphasis on understanding risk, and why it's important to save for one's future. That said, though, SEWA members do face crisis at the same level as anyone else. And what we did find, though, is that they emerge to be more financially adept. And SEWA members are more likely to have financial help during a crisis compared to those who aren't part of SEWA. And they also have wider networks. So rather than depend only on the community, family, and friends, they also can seek out or have the capacity to seek out formal institutions and also employers. And they're also more likely to invest in medical insurance again testament to our financial literacy work and door-to-door outreach than women not in SEWA. Understanding the concept of insurance means understanding risk, which is difficult actually for anyone. And it's again a testament to the door-to-door education services that they invest in medical insurance quite much more. In addition to the financial story, which I think we weren't surprised by given the sort of high penetration of financial services, what really struck us and I think is most interesting about this as well is that women in SEWA seem to have more of a voice. And voice is that intangible concept of courage, of confidence, of the ability to negotiate. And what this survey allowed us to do is to actually put something concrete to that intangible concept of voice. And in 3 areas we found SEWA members have more voice. One is at work, secondly is at home, and third in the family. At work, SEWA members negotiate better, they have higher rates, they work more typically, and home-based workers, for example, have been able to negotiate better piece rates. And that is illustrative of both the individual courage and confidence and also the power that comes from organizing, group negotiating power as well. They're also more likely to undergo skill training and interestingly more likely to use protective equipment like masks or protective glasses. In the home, we find that SEWA members negotiate within the family better. And what we mean by that is when women were asked if they keep their own income or are they asked to give it away to the rest of their family, within SEWA, about 3/4 of women actually have the capacity to keep their income themselves and decide what to do with it, as opposed to non-SEWA, where you'll see it's much lower. About 43% of women not in SEWA are asked to give their income away. This is also linked, we would think, ultimately in the long term to well-being. The sense that if a woman has more control over her income, she's more likely to spend it on food, nutrition, education, and improve the well-being of the household. And lastly, with the government, though we did see through the study that SEWA members, SEWA non-members, there's difficulty in accessing government schemes across the board, particularly also in Gujarat. But SEWA members are more likely to have BPL cards and also more likely to apply for government schemes. Whether or not they're successful is a different story. So in sum, I'll just say that in the face of insecurity, despite the growth in Gujarat, we feel that member-based organizations like SEWA, have been able to make a dent in 2 areas. One is in obviously financial savviness, financial adeptness, and also in terms of that concept of voice, of the courage, of the confidence to negotiate. That said, obviously there's a range of chronic insecurities that remain that seem to be intractable, but we continue to work at them at different levels. And I'll turn to Renata now to conclude on where SEWA sees this in terms of moving forward towards a more inclusive growth in Gujarat.
I just wanted to say that SEWA, what we try to do here is put numbers on impact, which of course is always a difficult thing to do. But SEWA is a movement which is embedded. So there is not that much difference between people who belong to SEWA and who don't belong to SEWA. Except that those who don't belong, who belong to SEWA have a much broader social network. They nowadays, moving forward, progress depends on social networks. And we find that women who do not belong to SEWA depend only on the families, whereas SEWA opens up a new world in a way for them. Moving forward is actually the few things that we had wanted to say, and I'll quickly go through it because I want to move to the next thing, which is that the reason we really wanted to talk about this was because we feel it is very important to promote and give representation to member-based organizations, especially of the poor. And what we are seeing is that organizations of people who are well off or who are in higher occupational groups have become powerful, whereas the organizations of the poor have become less and less powerful. We've listed here, I won't go into this now, but we've listed here 5 things that we are really campaigning on. One is there's a lot of money being spent on urban and rural infrastructure, but how much of it is going to the poor? Water, sanitation, their basic needs. Livelihoods, finance and market access. We've seen finance makes a big difference, livelihoods. We saw the lower levels of employment. social protection and health insurance to protect against insecurities. With the changing markets, skills has become, we find, extremely important. And finally, something that has gone off the agenda, which is women do have a double role. And so the importance of childcare is something that we should not forget, and we have, in a way, in the policy world, forgotten. I'll end here, and I have with us Paluben, who is sitting next to me, who is one of the earlier members of SEWA, and today is a director of SEWA Bank, and earlier was also in the SEWA board. And I think I'll turn to the next program.
इससे ले लीजिए इस किताब के साथ ले लीजिए and come close by, come close and
Come closer. Okay, I will.
ठीक है. So one more clap for the book.
અમે શાકભાજી વેચનાર અમદાવાદમાં છીએ અને મારું ઓળખાણ પાલુબેન વસરામભાઈ પરમાર છે. હું શાકભાજીનો ધંધો કરું છું અને મારી સાસુ શાકભાજી વેચતા હતા અને હું 20 વર્ષની હતી અને સબ્જી લઈને હું જાતી હતી આ ભાત લઈને. તો મારી સાસુ કે હવે તું શાકભાજી વેચ, એટલે મને તો વેચતા નહોતું આવડતું, પણ તોય હું શાકભાજી એ જમવા બે હું થોડું થોડું શાકભાજી વેચતી હતી. પછી અમને બહુ પોલીસવાળા દબાણ બહુ જ અમને હેરાન કરતા હતા, મારઝૂડ કરે, અમને દંડા મારે, અમને બહુ પરેશાન કરતા. મારું નામ લખે, અમે પોલીસમાં જાય તો બિયાતા બિયાતા જાય, આવી રીતે માથે ઓઢી નામ. પોલીસ જજ હામ આમ બોલી નાખીએ, દંડ ભરવા જાય. પછી પોલીસના દંડાએ અમે બહુ ખાધેલા છે અને આવી રીતે અમે ગરીબી બહુ વેઠી છે. અમે એક ટાઈમ ખાઈએ ને એક ટાઈમ નતા ખાતા. આવી રીતે અમારી જિંદગી કાઢી અમે.
Well, let me translate. She's Paluben Parmar. She said when she was, I'll do it very fast, 20 years old, she got married and her mother-in-law used to take her to sell vegetables, and from this she learnt. But at that time the police were very cruel and they used to beat them with sticks and also write their names, and they used to then be called to the court. And when they were called to the court or to the police station, they had to cover their heads and look down and sit on the floor, because if they looked up and didn't cover their heads, the fines would be higher. But if they looked down, the fines would be lower. So she said that time we were really poor and we would eat once a day.
મજૂર મહાજન મેં ઈલાબેન હતા તો એમની કને અમે ગયા. અમારે એક ભાઈએ કીધું કે ત્યાં જાઓ, ઈલાબેન છે તમારું કામ કરશે અને તમારે સાથ આપશે, પોલીસમાંથી દબાણમાંથી મુક્તિ અપાવશે. પછી મેં મજૂર મહાજનમાં ગયા તો બેન કને ગયા તો બેને અમારું સાંભળું. આજે અમારો ભગવાન થઈ ગયા બેન અને અમારી બધી વિનંતી સાંભળી અને અમે પછી મજૂર મહાજનમાંથી બેન અમારું કે તમે કેટલી બહેનો છો? તો અમે કહીએ કે બધી શાકભાજી વેચનાર બહેનો છીએ, દાણા પીઠા મેં માણક ચોક મેં. એવી રીતે પછી અમારા નામ લખ્યા. તમે ઉન્નયન કરી થઈ શકશો? કહો હા અમે થઈ શકશા. પછી એમને બહુ દબાણ આવે તો માલ લઈ જાય, કાંટા લઈ જાય, અમને બહુ પરેશાન કરતા. પછી ઈલાબેન અમારી જોડે આવે, અમને આગેવાન બનાવ્યા. પછી અમે મ્યુનિસિપાલિટીમાં જાય, બધી બહેનોનો કઠ્ઠો કરી અને બધી બહેનો અહીંયા કોર્પોરેશનમાં જઈ અને માલ છોડાવીએ, કાંટા લઈએ. આવી રીતે અમે.
She says that at that time Majur Mahajan was Textile Labour Association was still there, and they told us, why don't you go and meet Ilaben? So we went and met Ilaben and we said that can you help us, and then you will become our God if you help us. So she said, well, how many are you? So we collected all ourselves, and she said, can you form a union and will you pay membership fee? And we said yes, we will form a union and pay membership fees. So we got together, and then